Hello and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by RenRx, how to calculate the ROI of test automation and how to maximize the impact of your test automation. Before we begin, I do have a couple of housekeeping announcements to make. All attendees in the webinar will remain on mute throughout the entire webinar. If you do have any questions, please use the questions panel in the GoToWebinar console, which and this console is usually located in the right-hand side of your screen. Please feel free to ask questions at any time throughout the webinar, and we will do our best to answer during the webinar via the questions panel, and we will also have some time at the end to answer questions live as well. This webinar is also being recorded, so anyone who has registered for the webinar will receive a link to the recording, usually around 48 hours after the webinar ends. This link can also be shared to anyone on your team who may be interested in watching it as well. And now, I am John Reynolds, a product manager here at RenRx, and also with us is Julie. I'll let Julie talk.
Hey, John, how are you? Yeah, I'm Julie Fuelberth, and I'm also a product manager here at RenRx. And so we're excited to talk about ROI and ROI related to test automation. But first, let's just talk about ROI basics and what it is and what it is not. So what ROI is a performance measure used to evaluate the efficiency of an investment. And it's a calculation of the impact of that investment on the business. So it's usually expressed as a ratio or a percentage. What it is not is a measure of a business net profit or gross margin. And it also is not a monetary measure over time that can be compared with other things. It's a very popular metric because of its versatility and simplicity. But essentially, it can be used as a kind of a rudimentary gauge of investment profitability, but it's not one of those metrics that's included on the income statement, your financial statements, or like a balance sheet. It's more of a measure of the health of a decision that the business has made. But you need to consider some options about ROI. ROI can be used to make apples to apples comparisons if you're comparing it over the same time frame. ROI does not take into consideration a holding period or a passage of time. So it can miss the opportunity cost of investing elsewhere. Like it doesn't consider opportunity costs of, well, what if I did something else rather than this? And although it's a quick and easy way to estimate the success of an investment, it also has some serious limitations. Again, it fails to reflect that time value of money. And it can be difficult to meaningfully compare it to other investments. But how do you know what's a good ROI? Well, that also depends on your risk tolerance. Like if you're very high risk, then ROI probably won't mean much to you because it's going to be hard for you to make a choice or investment. And then the required time frame for the investment to generate a return. If you are looking for a quick result rather than one that can be measured with some substantial data, then using ROI to make a business decision might not be the best choice for you to use as far as a tool for your decision. So that being said, let's look at the basic calculations that might be behind calculating ROI. As I said, ROI is a pretty rudimentary calculation. It's your gain from the investment that you made minus the cost of the investment over the cost of the investment. Again, a ratio. Most people consider ROI to be related to money or profit or financial gains, and they may believe that it belongs on the financial statement, like I said before. But the observer here and our participants should remember it's a ratio basically determining the efficiency of the choice that you've made. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I agree. So it's very important to note that this webinar today, we are focusing on ROI in a different light. We're not looking at your
Mm-hmm.
return on investment like in your 401k. I'm getting 10% year over year. We're looking at um, ROI as your time and resource investment into a test automation project compared to, say, the cost of that investment to
Mm-hmm.
really see is it worth your company's investment in pursuing this? Typically, as we'll see in just a moment, the answer is going to be yes. Taking on a test automation project is worth the investment. So here we are focusing on, like I said, the ROI calculation based on uh, implementing a test automation strategy, not investing money into a brokerage account or anything like that. So,
But I
so
I
we have.
might I might call you after this webinar and find out how you're getting 10% on your 401k. But
Oh, that
back
was
to
just
test
wishful thinking.
automation. Exactly.
So, in a previous survey that we ran, we surveyed around 300 IT leaders in cooperation with Pulse Research. And the data for this survey was collected between December 7th, 2021 to January 30th of 2022. In this poll, the question here is, if you conducted a project to automate your software testing within the past 2 years, how long did it take to see a return on your investment? And here, 78% saw a 1 year or less return on investment in test automation. So over 3/4 of the people within 1 year saw that taking on a test automation project was worth the effort. And that's what we're getting at here with ROI, is it's worth the effort. So when you consider
Oh,
that in an earlier survey question, participants found that budget, staffing, training, and technology as the biggest barriers to start a GUI test automation project. Those that have overcome these hurdles have seen a success rate within 4 to 12 months. Or, spinning this in a slightly different wording, is that 74% of the respondents experienced an increase in the number of tests run, a higher rate of identifying bugs before deployment, a shorter time to release, faster product to market, and revenue recognition sooner within the first 4 to 12 months of implementing their strategy. And me being me, always going back to the income statement, you see a bottom line improvement first, and as time progresses, your customer satisfaction improves, which begins to increase your top line as well.
that's pretty cool too that it's I mean those statistics even from 0 to 6 months, 51%. When you're trying to implement a change of a process and using software to do it, that's a pretty impressive ROI. So as we mentioned, using test automation and figuring the ROI is a little bit different than what you regularly do. The trend these days in software development is to shift from the focus of kind of a financial investment to more of a focus on the evaluation of efficiencies. Where's your efficiency in making this change? It's concerned with the process by which a plan is delivered to produce the outputs. So it's more focused on, is this going to improve my process? Is this going to improve the ability for me to deliver that product or the software faster or better? It also allows you to compare the inputs with the outputs to determine best how to maximize your result. And we'll talk about the strategies of maximizing your ROI here in a little bit. And then there's also questions that you can try to answer. Is this process then achieving the planned outputs? Is this what I anticipated when I evaluated switching over to automated testing? Are the resources being achieved to achieve the outputs? Are you getting what you wanted? And could the use of resources be improved? That's a big question. And that's when you talk about productivity between your staff and the software that you're using, you always need to see if there's a way you can improve that. Is the implementation proving to be feasible? again, is this what you expected and the result that you were going to get? And do you have it properly and adequately resourced? A lot of evolving technologies and software, they allow us to be able to manage data or the processes and limited resource. My gosh, there's so many articles and blogs about that out there because we want to be more efficient. But most notably, right now, a limited resource could be staffing and hiring of people that you need. So to be a good project and product manager, you want to be able to then to try to utilize software to fill those gaps. So John, when considering, where would you find efficiencies in software product development? What questions might you ask on more of the testing automation side?
Yeah, so when you're thinking about this, you can just generally ask, you want to look at each kind of department of your software development life cycle. So your developers,
Point.
how can I give them more time to innovate faster and deliver faster? What can I do to help my developers out? And then on the other end of the spectrum, on your QA side, if obviously developers can do testing as well, but if you're looking at the testing side, how are you sure you're delivering a quality product? Are you getting proper reporting from your tools? Are your reports being generated automatically for you? And also, what can I do with my manual testers to free up their time so they can focus on the items they're supposed to? So are they doing a lot of manual repetitive tests? What kind of areas can I focus on from my testing side, for my manual testers? What can I take off their plate so they can do what they like, help reduce burnout and keep them from just doing the same things over and over again every day.
I think both of us speak from experience on that manual testing. We totally appreciate when someone's trying to improve efficiency so we aren't doing those over and over and over again. Spent several years doing QA testing manually. So let's talk about the benefits and costs of test automation. So the benefits of test automation, there's several of them listed here, and you'll notice they're increased and reduced, usually leading the sentence. It's always a good thing to make that difference between your costs and your investment to be bigger. But basically, benefits can be categorized into increased testing efficiency, increased testing effectiveness, and then a reduced time to market. So reducing that time so you get that product out there faster. In most cases, I'm sure our participants in their organizations, those stakeholders in the decision are making a purchase decision. They like their justification on a quantified or quantitative justification. So the bottom line is test automation value stems from running multiple tests at the same time or running automated tests multiple times. It's kind of a hard sentence to get out there, John.
Yeah, and it's we've run various polls over time asking IT leaders about different items like the return on investment from automation. And one of the other, we also asked the poll question about the benefits of automated testing. And over 50% of our respondents, and I said that they received both faster feedback from testing and also a shortened time to market. And nearly 50% also indicated they were receiving earlier identification of defects. So these items all point to efficiency. So test automation, the main goal behind test automation is really efficiency. Getting out is more tests faster and getting that feedback faster, getting your bug reports automated, getting your failed test alerts, whatever you need to do to get that feedback so you can analyze your results and give your product a green light to go out or go back and go to debugging or dig into issues that you find to prevent major issues from going out into production. So while monetary value is being the traditional measure of return on investment, there are other ways that it can be quantified when we're talking about test automation, like I said, as some of these items, the increased efficiencies, more tests, faster tests, quicker feedback, better quality. These are less tangible items, but items that you can definitely see just by looking at test results. So am I running 100 tests in a day, or am I running 2,000 tests in a day? Those are the things that test automation can help you transition towards.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned it earlier. Then as you start reducing the amount of time the developers have to be involved in that, they're innovating faster, which is also giving you, an edge on your competitors because they're developing and innovating newer parts of the product faster. So great ideas about benefits, but there are also costs. You've got three main buckets of cost: infrastructure, the testing framework. Are you going to write it, or is that part of the software? And then I think what's very important, the trained and skilled staff to perform your tests.
Yeah, and so as you said, there are definitely costs to implementing test automation. It's never free, even with the free tools. You can implement free tools, but you still have to pay someone to go through and actually to do the implementation. So you have to do some analysis on finding the tools that are best for your organization, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But finding the items, finding out what best suits your team, and starting to break through those barriers, because cost is a barrier. Even like I said, for free tools, there's no such thing as a free lunch. But once you step into this automation and start automating your tests, you will see the benefits from the efficiencies we mentioned, getting more tests run, and then starting to get that feedback.
100%. Yeah.
Sometimes it may be necessary to even hire an external team to come in and get your automation set up for you and train your staff. So it may not be something that you have the in-house skills to do. So there are costs associated. We're not going to deny that, but part of the return on investment calculation is looking at the benefits you're going to get compared to the cost. And test automation almost always comes out, as we saw, 78% within a year, see a return on investment there.
Yeah, especially those repetitive tasks. Absolutely. So you mentioned strategies to maximize your ROI. So let's jump into those, and then we'll jump into the calculator that we have. So maximizing your ROI. So it isn't quite as easy as just, hey, I'm going to increase revenue and decrease cost. First of all, you have to ask yourself questions, especially using automated testing. Do you have a strategy and plan in place? You are at least considering test automation if you're trying to determine the ROI of implementing one. And where is that tipping point and where you will see the ROI in time and money? So first of all, you need to have a readiness assessment. We talked about this, especially related to the cost, where you should include a review of the existing processes, like what's happening now, as well as to ensure that you've got resources in place, a test device, test data, and environments. But most importantly, you're going to need one or more champions, as we mentioned, on your team, and you want them to be excited about the automation and willing to dig in and drive that project. So you need to prepare a test automation plan. You need to determine what you're going to automate first and put together the right team.
Yeah, thanks, Julia. Sorry, I couldn't find the mute button.
Want to mute you, John?
So what we've seen, is that teams do get the greatest return on investment by focusing on the right testing and automating the repetitive work, where you're performing the same tests across multiple browsers, regression tests, data-driven testing. So repetitive tests are the ones that are the greatest candidates for test automation. And so you get the return on investment here, not just by productivity improvements, but also in quality and user satisfaction. So as testers have more time to focus on other things, they can more thoroughly test the product because they're automating the tasks they don't really need to do manually. So the tests that they have to do over and over again are the ones that are the best candidates for automation.
Mm-hmm.
And also, when you are considering taking on a test automation project, you do have to take, as you said, the assessment. You have to do a few things. Evaluate your current processes. Where are your bottlenecks in delivery? Are things hitting QA and then slowing down, or do you need to shift left and do some more testing earlier in development? But you have to evaluate your current processes and set targets. So start focusing on the right items and have reasonable targets, because you're not going to
Mm-hmm.
automate everything. It's not going to be possible. You want to focus on we said the repeatable tests, API testing, finding tools that do uh, that meet your needs. So getting into choosing the right tools. So if I have just a website, I don't need to have a tool that has a whole bunch of costs built in that bundles in um, testing frameworks that I don't need. Um, so you want to look at the tools that meet your organization needs, but not only from the framework and the product you're producing, but also from your testers' perspective. Do your testers have a lot of automation experience in writing automated tests, coded tests? If not, look towards a low code or no code solution that gives you record and playback options, natural language processing or something like that, which suits your team needs as well. Because if your testers, if you think, say, Selenium is the route you want to go, and your testers have no experience with Selenium, it's probably not the right investment, because where are you going to start? So choosing the right tool is just as important as going with the right process. Automating, or it's the main. I would say the main or key factor in some of your automation success, because your tool has to be usable by your staff.
Mm.
And then prioritize. Like I said, choosing the tests that are repeated, the easy tests to automate. Those are the best ones to start with. Because not only do your manual testers spend a lot of time doing repeated tasks like data-driven testing, testing a login screen over and over again with valid and invalid prompts or different permissions, or entering data into a form over and over again. Not only is that a huge time sink for your testers, it's also not very exciting. So it's basically a data entry, and data entry is not glamorous. Your testers have skills that could be used on other things. So taking that time that they're investing in, data entry and allowing them to do other things will help as well. And the final item is setting yourself up for long-term success. So when you're doing test automation, you have to set up your tests well and iterate on them frequently to make sure that they stay up to date, and that you have reusable modules. So you don't want every test case to be independent on your tool. You want them to have intertwined modules, so that when you change a button that's present on 20 different screens, that you only have to modify that module to update all of your other test cases. So there are ways to set up your project with proper tools. I can plug RANRX here because we do offer, the record and playback for testers who don't have experience writing automation tests, but we also have the full IDE, which provides the ability to write fully coded tests using the RANRX API. We also do reusable modules, so you can make those minor changes that will propagate to all of your tests that use those modules. So there are plenty of things you can do, but you have to make these considerations when you are starting an automation project. We also did a webinar on transitioning from automated to manual testing, where we go more into detail on each of these points as well.
Yeah, most definitely check that one out. It's on our website.
So following from this, we have on the RenRX website a ROI calculator that you can use to plug in some numbers and determine the ROI for your planned automation project.
Thanks, John. Absolutely. We do have a ROI calculator on the website, and the link will be made available for all you, the participants, and you can share it with those in your company. The spreadsheet does contain 3 sections. It talks about the labor costs that you are, pardon me, involved in your testing, estimated time savings through the automation. So you've got to talk about the labor cost of doing it manually, what is going to cost you to automate that test, and then test case analysis, including the number of times that you run the test, how many times that you've done it manually, tester expertise that's involved. Maybe you're going to have some people that are paid more because of their expertise, and then others, than more non-technical folks, might be able to run some of these automated tests for you, and that then reduces the amount of expenditure you have. So looking at our ROI calculator, we talked about how we'll be inputting some of the labor costs and the number of testers and the test runs. We'll see that in a minute. But let's just talk real quickly about some of the outputs that you'll see. You're going to see the labor cost to run the test manually, and then also the cost to automate the test. And then you're going to see the savings of that first execution run. So the very first time you run it, you're probably not going to see, great savings. But over time, when you look at how many iterations, how many times you run it in a cycle, how many cycles are in a month, then it really starts adding up, especially those repetitive tests that you might run, 100, 200, 1,000 times throughout a month. And so then we're going to look at the time saved also if those tests were run overnight. Because right now you're running those tests during the day because you're running them manually. Well, then you can start kicking those tests off at night and not having anyone basically babysit them or watch them. And John, to your point, then you can start looking at those failed messages, your reports, and remediating those bugs. And then finally, in the spreadsheet, we will also see what your time savings then would be per month. John, do you have any other comments before we jump into the calculator?
Yeah, it looks like a daunting list, I guess, but it's this is a spreadsheet, so it's really a plug and play. So you'll see in a moment that it's not. You shouldn't be overwhelmed with numbers.
Not at all.
We do try to make this straightforward and easy to understand.
Exactly. In fact, all of these are created for you and generated as long as you enter the right inputs. So talking about the inputs, the first part of the calculator is that you need to go in and basically enter, they're in a column A, the first column, the types of people, the personnel that will be running the tests or are running them now, and then the number of team members on your team that have that level of expertise, their hourly labor costs per position, and then hours per month. And here, like in our example, we've got them working, estimating 42 hours a week, so 168 a month. And then their labor costs. And that final column there is available hours per month. That's the total available hours based upon the number of members you have on the team. So basically on that first row, 2 times 168. Now we get down to the second section, estimated time savings. So what's your projection of the time savings that you're going to have if you automate the test? So we said here in our example that switching it from automated from manual is going to save us 50% of the time. And so projected time savings of running that overnight, you're going to get that same 50%, right? Because you're saving it during the day, you're going to save it at night by not having somebody have to follow along and run the test. And then, so our total savings for the test run estimated would be 100%. Your second section that you'll see in the calculator, and I've kind of used a yellow highlighter to show, these are the areas that you would input into the calculator. So the test case, you might want to put a description. Hey, how many minutes does it take to run manually? Because we're going to need that to determine the cost. How many times do you run that test in a test cycle? And then also, how many test cycles do you run in a month? And then here's where you want to enter that person, the skilled level of the person that will be running that test. And then what happens in the next column is then based upon the minutes that you estimated that it takes to run it manually, here's our cost. So to run that one test for a login on line 1 is $1.25. And then we've also entered an area where you can estimate how long is it going to take for you to automate that test, not to run the test automation because you can kick that off with a script, but here's your investment on automating that test and the level of person that needs to write that test or to record that test. Again, with Ranorex, you can use our record and play no code, low code feature. And then it would probably be somebody that's less skilled or has a non-technical skill could actually record that test. And then finally, you're going to see your outputs. And so these are the ones that we talked about on that original slide. So let me just kind of describe what you see here, and then we can jump into our Q&A area. But the first column is the labor cost to automate. So this is the cost per hour that we had times the time to automate. So we talked about that person that needs to either write that code for the test script or records it in something like Ranorex. So this is the cost to actually automate it. And then what you'll see in the next column is basically the savings cost for the first execution. So it's negative, not much of a savings, because we had our cost to run it manually, and this is our cost to estimate it. So this is, not the best ROI, but it's the first time you've run it. So let's move on to the next column where this is the labor cost per cycle. So the number of iterations, number of times we run that test times the cost to execute it manually. So here's now how we're going to start creating that ROI based upon multiple iterations. Column M, you're looking at the labor cost per month. So the number of iterations in the test cycle. We said earlier we're going to do it 4 times. So now we've got a labor cost of $60. And then you go to column N. So this is where we're execution time savings for the first month. So our first savings in hours after the first month, so the multiple test cycles, multiple iterations, is going to be a half an hour. Okay, that sounds good in hours. But then how about subsequent months? So when we start looking at columns O, P, and Q, we've taken out the cost of automating the test because that was in the first month. And so now we're saving 2 hours for this one test run. Remember, it's our login test run. We're saving 2 hours a month during the day. If we'd run the test at night, we had estimated we would save 2 hours if we ran it at night. So total savings per month after the first month, after we've done our investment, is 4 hours per month. And that's just on the one test cycle or test run. John, any comments on what we've walked through so far? Or shall we open it up to some questions and answers that our participants might have?
Yeah, I just think it's interesting to point out that, yeah, the last few columns start showing you your time savings for
Mm-hmm.
every month that you run a test. So 4 hours may not seem much, may not seem like a huge amount, but we're talking about a single test or a couple sets of tests for testing your login screen. And the second row would be a database query, which is going to be probably
Mm-hmm.
a more technical test to run through from a manual perspective, but that's saving 12 hours a month. So that's really combined, you're talking 10% of a person's week is already freed up by doing these two tests.
Oh,
And
100%. Good
so
point.
over time, as you're doing more and more of these tests, and another big factor that plays into this is the number of cycles or the number of times that you are running a test in a cycle. So cross-browser testing, if you're doing Chrome, Firefox, Edge, and Safari, that's 4 cycles right there just for basic browser tests. So if you take more or less every web browser test you have, unless it's browser specific, you're running those 4 times. So this really starts to multiply out and save you a lot of time, especially when doing, uh, with your automation. And it also applies to, platforms or device testing, the mobile testing. If you're testing on different different Android devices or different iPhone devices, it really starts, everything multiplies out and you get the savings. That's where the savings really comes in.
Percent. Yeah, you've got the efficiency, the productivity, and then you can put some cost to it. So with that, we will move to the Q&A time. It looks like we do have one question so far, and it's a good one and very legit. What about maintenance costs? And definitely our calculator is looking at the efficiencies and the ROI of once you have things in place, you are going to find bugs and you are going to have to remediate those or also maintain your test scripts. If you have a product like Ranorex that can have a self-healing quality to its object recognition, that helps a little bit. But there will be those maintenance costs. But as you automate your tests and facilitate people being able to then have more time probably for exploratory testing, your maintenance costs will reduce over time, at least I think.
Yeah, maintenance is one of those inherent costs that we didn't really, it's not included in the calculator. You could
Mm-hmm.
likely take the calculator and add in a column to calculate your maintenance costs and kind of build that into your cost savings. If you think that you're going to spend, an hour a week, but by someone just maintaining your test cases, you can
Mm-hmm.
add that in. You could just probably just add in a column and try to calculate that in and take that into consideration as well.
Absolutely. You could even maybe, if you wanted to, you could reduce that percentage of what you think you're going to save in time to automate the test. Maybe take out 5% for what you think you'll spend in maintaining your tests. That's one of the reasons that that's considered in part of the calculation, so that you can try to figure out really how much you would save. So we've
Yes, we
got
have.
another question. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. The next question for how about the rest of the manual tests that remain?
Hmm.
So test automation is never going to replace, in my opinion, is never going to replace manual testing. I may be wrong in 20 years, but I don't see that. I don't see that coming anytime soon. Your manual testers are still needed for that quality control, the getting your eyes on your application. Um, you know, your smoke testing, your exploratory testing, trying to break your system, trying to do things that people don't think about, unplugging your laptop in the middle of a test or in the middle of, doing things like that, turning off your screen,
Hmm.
closing your computer, unplugging your mouse, unplugging your keyboard. These are the things that you're not probably going to do easily with the test automation suite. And these are the kind of things that That's where manual testers will come in. And there will always be manual testing for these kind of things. And that's what your manual testers should be doing. Your manual testers really, in my opinion, shouldn't be doing data entry over and over again. They should be focusing on toying with your application and really getting into it to see what they can find, make sure everything looks right, and they get that look and feel and acceptance testing.
Yeah, you really want those manual testers to be basically the experts of your product because they've been, through it with a fine-tooth comb, trying to find ways in which you can either improve or fix things that might break. A lot of that exploratory testing. And I think this also, John, goes back to your points earlier about, how do you set yourself up for success in picking the right test to do and to automate. But I really want to emphasize what you said at the very end of our discussion on the calculator. It's the repetitive nature that if you can quantify that first few tests or that first month's worth exponentially and then, kind of play it out, that's when it really grows. And like I said, stakeholders want kind of a quantitative justification. This is where you can start giving them those numbers and start really talking about your process.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. I don't see any other questions. Do you, John?
We had a follow-up question about
Oh, we did? Okay. Oh,
test
yeah.
data selection or deployment. So when you're thinking about test data that you're inputting into your application, I assume this is what you're referring to, like data-driven testing, say logins or data entry type items. You have a few options. So when your testers are manually doing these tests, are they just thinking of items and values to enter in? Most tools that use data-driven testing use some kind of spreadsheet as a data source or a database. Some companies, depending on depending on their structure, will use real life data. Some companies just prefer randomly generated data. There are also tools out there that can generate random data for you, depending on what kind of data you're trying to enter into your system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when I think about data inputs, I'm thinking about basically some null or edge cases, trying to enter in negative values into currency fields or too large a numbers, too many decimal points. So you want some variation in your data, not just validating that 2 + 2 = 4. You want to start getting into some of the other items to make sure that your application is handling invalid data as well. Those also, I think, a good choice for some data input. We do have a question from, I hope I pronounced his name correctly, Ewan, for about upgrading your license. We would just recommend reaching out to your sales team about this. So it should be sales@ranrx.com to get information about any kind of license upgrade that you need.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other questions from anyone?
I don't see any. So, John, I want to thank you for being part of the webinar today. This has always been fun. We both love to promote and to talk about RANRX test automation and especially ROI. If you want to contact us, here's our website, ranrx.com. And then we'll also make the link available for you to try out the test case ROI calculation. Any closing thoughts, John?
No, I appreciate it, Julie. I appreciate all of the effort you put into this and the information you presented. So, and I want to thank everyone else for attending.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.